For 40 years, John Harper lived under the weight of a false treason accusation that destroyed his reputation and isolated him from friends and family. The real betrayal came from those in command, who pressured a key witness to lie, letting injustice define his life. But when his granddaughter Emily uncovered hidden documents, the truth sparked a battle that would finally turn everything around. And just wait to see how the long-delayed justice unfolded, restoring John's honor and proving that resilience and truth can triumph against all odds. In the sweltering summer of 1975, John Harper stepped off the plane at the airport in his hometown. The weight of years spent in Vietnam heavy on his shoulders. He imagined the warm welcome of family and friends, the quiet pride in their eyes, the sense of accomplishment that comes after serving one's country. He thought of the long nights in the barracks, the endless drills, the moments when fear had gripped him, and the courage that had carried him through. All of it had led to this moment, a return to normalcy, to recognition, to being home. But the welcome he received was nothing like he had imagined. Before he even had a chance to breathe, the whispers began. Murmurs in the streets, questioning glances at the diner counter, cold shoulders from people who had once called him friend. And then came the official news. He was accused of treason. Allegedly, he had betrayed his comrades and sold secret documents to the enemy. The words hit him like a thunderclap, leaving him reeling in disbelief. John knew he had done no such thing. Every decision he had made in the field had been guided by duty and integrity. Yet the charges were there, in black and white, as undeniable as the sun in the sky. Shock was the first wave. It felt as though the ground had been pulled out from beneath him. He could barely comprehend the magnitude of what he was facing. Friends he had trusted for years, some of whom had shared his struggles in combat, now looked at him with suspicion. The men he had relied on in battle, the brothers in arms who had sworn they had each other's backs, kept their distance. Even his commanding officers, those who should have understood the truth, seemed reluctant to defend him. It was as if the world he had known had shifted overnight into a cold, unrecognizable place. Then came the fury. A deep, burning anger that surged through him with each passing day. How could this happen? How could the life he had devoted to service, the sacrifices he had made, be dismissed so easily? John paced the small apartment he had moved into upon returning, fists clenched, heart racing. He remembered the moments in the field when he had fought for every inch, for the lives of the men beside him. And now those very lives were being called into question by accusations that were baseless, yet powerful enough to destroy his reputation. The injustice of it all gnawed at him. He had always believed that honor mattered, that actions spoke louder than rumors, and that truth would carry weight. Yet here he was, branded a traitor in the eyes of his community, unable to convince anyone of his innocence. Every attempt to explain, every word of protest, seemed to vanish against the tidal wave of suspicion. It was a loneliness unlike any he had known in the jungles of Vietnam, a quiet, oppressive isolation that pressed down on him from all sides. John's life, as he had known it, began to crumble. Job opportunities vanished the moment someone saw his name in the papers. Former friends crossed the street to avoid him. Even strangers stared with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. The anger inside him did not fade. It simmered, sharp and unrelenting, a fire fueled by disbelief and injustice. He had survived the chaos of war, the uncertainty of combat, and the constant threat of danger. Yet now he faced a different battlefield, one where the enemy was society itself and the rules were skewed against him. This was just the beginning. The anger, raw and unyielding, would drive John in ways he could not yet foresee. It would be the force that refused to let him disappear quietly, that whispered he could reclaim his life and his honor, no matter how long it took. In that first shattering week back home, John Harper understood one undeniable truth. Injustice had found him, and he would not rest until it was confronted. For 40 years, John Harper carried the weight of a name that had been tarnished, a reputation stolen before he even had a chance to reclaim it. Life moved on around him, but John felt frozen in a moment that had defined him unfairly. He watched as opportunities he had earned slipped through his fingers, not because of lack of skill or dedication, but because of a label he had never deserved. The world saw him as a traitor, and society's judgment clung to him like a shadow, invisible yet inescapable. Each passing day was a quiet reminder of the injustice that had been inflicted upon him. John had tried to rebuild, to create some semblance of normalcy, but the damage was pervasive. Jobs were refused, not with explanation, but with the subtle glance of a resume discarded unseen. Longtime friends and acquaintances hesitated to speak with him, unsure whether to trust a man they once admired. Even family gatherings were strained. The stigma of accusation had rippled outward, and some relatives could not overcome the doubt planted decades earlier. Every social interaction was a negotiation with the unspoken suspicion that hovered in the air. Pain settled deep in his chest, an unrelenting presence that never left. It was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like a persistent ache that follows you everywhere, in your sleep and waking hours alike. There were moments, often late at night, when John would sit alone at the kitchen table, staring at his hands, and wonder if the world would ever know the truth. Compassion for himself and the life he had lost mingled with despair. How could he prove innocence when official records, the very authorities meant to uphold justice, branded him guilty? Every piece of documentation, every signature and stamp seemed to fortify the wall that separated him from the life he had imagined upon returning from service. Even so, a spark remained. Deep inside, buried beneath decades of humiliation and isolation, a quiet determination persisted. John would not allow himself to vanish quietly into the background. He reminded himself daily that truth does not fade with time, even if it is hidden. The real enemy was not only the accusation itself, but the world's willingness to accept it without question. That knowledge became both burden and motivation. He could not undo the past, but he could preserve the hope that someday, somehow, the truth would emerge. John learned patience in its harshest form. Each rejection, each doubt cast by another person tested him, yet also hardened his resolve. He wrote letters that were never sent, kept meticulous notes of dates and conversations, and quietly maintained a record of the events that had led to his disgrace. While the world labeled him, he silently documented everything, an invisible archive of integrity that no accusation could erase. By the end of each day, John's body was weary, and his spirit heavy, but the ember of hope glimmered faintly, refusing to extinguish. He had survived the war, the chaos, and the uncertainty of combat, and now he endured a different kind of battlefield, one waged in the quiet corners of bureaucratic systems and societal judgment. Though the pain was constant, he carried it with a quiet dignity, knowing that the truth, like a seed, could one day grow. The decades of isolation and struggle had not destroyed him. They had merely prepared him for the moment when he would reclaim his name and his honor at last. By 2015, John Harper had lived most of his life in a shadow he never asked for. Decades of doubt, suspicion, and isolation had left him wary of believing in miracles or second chances. But life has a way of surprising even the most hardened hearts. And for John, that surprise came in the form of his granddaughter, Emily. Emily was bright, determined, and relentlessly curious. A law student with a keen sense of justice and an unshakable belief in doing what was right. She had grown up hearing her grandfather's story, though filtered through years of silence, careful omissions, and the quiet dignity of a man who carried a lifelong burden in his heart. One afternoon, Emily was sifting through a pile of old military archives at the university library, searching for a reference for a legal research project, when she stumbled upon something unexpected. Among the faded reports and dusty folders were documents that had never been presented in court, evidence that could potentially change everything about John's case. Her hands trembled slightly as she read, disbelief giving way to a rush of exhilaration. One report in particular caught her eye. A detailed account indicating that a key witness against John had been pressured by military command to give testimony that was inaccurate, testimony that had contributed significantly to his lifelong disgrace. The discovery ignited a spark in John that he hadn't felt in decades. Sitting across from Emily in his small study, surrounded by yellowed papers and stacks of notes he had kept for years, John felt an unfamiliar rush of hope. His heart, long accustomed to caution and quiet despair, began to beat faster with anticipation. The flame of belief that truth could prevail, a flame he had guarded carefully through the years, was rekindled. For the first time in 40 years, he allowed himself to imagine a future in which his name could be cleared and his honor restored. Emily's energy was contagious. Together, they meticulously reviewed every report, every document, and every witness statement. They cross-referenced dates, tracked inconsistencies, and built a compelling narrative that showed the gaps in the original case against John. The work was grueling and painstaking. Weeks stretched into months as they navigated legal bureaucracy, consulted experts, and gathered testimony from those who could remember events long past. Each new discovery was both exhausting and invigorating, each small victory a beacon in the darkness that had surrounded John for so long. With Emily at his side, John felt the weight of decades lift slightly with every page turned and every witness interviewed. The hope he had once considered fragile and fleeting now grew stronger, cemented by tangible evidence and an unwavering commitment to justice. He remembered the long nights of despair and isolation, the silent frustration at being misunderstood and falsely accused, and he realized that those experiences had prepared him for this moment. The struggle to reclaim his name would be hard, but the path was now illuminated. By the end of the year, a sense of cautious optimism had settled over John. Hope was no longer just a distant idea or fragile wish. It had become an actionable force, guiding him and Emily toward a future in which the truth could finally shine. In the quiet moments of reflection, John allowed himself to feel it fully, the belief that justice, though delayed, could be found, and that the years of pain he had endured might soon give way to something far more powerful: redemption. In the spring of 2018, the culmination of decades-long struggle finally arrived. Jonathan "John" Harper, a man who had carried the heavy burden of accusation and suspicion for over 40 years, walked into the courthouse with a sense of quiet anticipation that had been foreign to him for most of his adult life. His granddaughter, Emily, walked beside him, her confidence and determination reflecting the tireless effort they had invested together. The courtroom was filled with spectators, friends, and even some skeptics who had followed John's story, all waiting for a resolution that had long seemed impossible. The judge's gavel fell, and with it came the words that would forever alter the course of John's life. All charges against him were officially dismissed. Every accusation, every shadow of doubt was lifted. The legal system, slow and methodical as it often is, had finally acknowledged the truth. Tears welled in John's eyes as the weight of decades of pain, isolation, and injustice began to dissolve. For the first time in 40 years, he felt unburdened, free to stand tall not as a man marked by suspicion, but as a veteran honored for his courage and service. Around him, the room seemed to hold its collective breath before the waves of emotion broke. Family members, friends, and even strangers reached out, embracing him with warmth and respect. John's story, once marred by doubt and suspicion, had transformed into a testament to the endurance of integrity and the power of truth. The sound of applause and heartfelt congratulations washed over him like sunlight breaking through years of persistent clouds. He could feel the joy and relief in the very air, the recognition of his long-fought battle not only against falsehoods, but also against the silent erosion of his reputation over time. For John, the victory was deeply personal. Every lonely evening spent sifting through records, every rejection from people who could not see the truth, and every pang of despair he had endured was vindicated in this moment. He remembered the anger, the pain, and the hope that had sustained him, and he realized that all those experiences had shaped the resilience he now embodied. His triumph was not merely legal, it was emotional, spiritual, and profoundly human. Beyond the courtroom, John's story began to resonate more widely. Veterans who had faced similar challenges, accusations, misunderstandings, or bureaucratic hurdles found encouragement in his journey. His perseverance became a beacon, proof that even after decades of silence and struggle, the truth could emerge and prevail. Public recognition followed, articles highlighted his courage, interviews shared his unwavering determination, and communities celebrated him as an emblem of justice reclaimed. John's name, once tarnished by false claims, was restored to its rightful place as a symbol of honor and integrity. Yet the impact of his story reached beyond personal redemption. It inspired others to hold fast to their principles, to fight patiently and persistently for what was right, and to trust that justice, though often delayed, can ultimately prevail. In the quiet moments that followed the hearing, John reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The anger, the pain, the hope, and now the triumph. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for the support of Emily, for the opportunity to reclaim his life, and for the chance to demonstrate that the human spirit can endure, persevere, and shine even after the darkest of times. As he left the courthouse, John Harper walked with a dignity renewed, his story etched into the hearts of all who witnessed it. His example would live on, a reminder that resilience, truth, and honor are never truly lost, and that even the longest journey through injustice can end in triumph and inspiration.